Hey, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, whatever time it is. It
That's
is
right.
June 23rd, and this is Azure Flash News episode 80, and we are live on
90.
YouTube. Oh,
Episode
90.
90.
90. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, I
Rick,
know. We're up there, man.
how's it going for you, buddy?
It's going good. I'm actually at the office today, and I do have a special new addition. I'm just going to put this out here. Yesterday, I got some ink that I've been waiting for quite some time, if you can see it. It's a sun.
Oh,
It's on my
hold on, I'm
wrist.
looking. Hold on. There we go. Wait, let me
Right?
see it again.
You got it? There it
I see it
is.
now. Nice. Oh,
Yep.
I see it's
I've
still
been
got its
waiting,
protective.
waiting, waiting, waiting. So I got some new ink. This is the first one that's actually completely non-hidable, unless I'm wearing
Mm,
a long sleeve shirt.
nice, which that
Yeah.
doesn't happen too often, but it does happen
No,
sometimes.
it's a rarity for me. Let's be
Yeah,
honest. No, it's
nice.
good. How are things over at the Garner household?
That's good, man. We're just trying to, stay safe and, get some work done. Well, there's plenty of
Yeah.
that to do. Oh my gosh, work has been so busy. How about you, Rick?
Oh, without a doubt, it's been crazy times as people are deciding that it's really hard to run a data center when you can't have people in it.
I know. I know. It's a lot of extra stuff. So,
So in
um,
comes Azure, right?
yeah, in comes Azure. We have been so busy. Sam, we're glad to be here for you, the
Yes.
customers, to help you and give you some announcements. Ricky, why don't you kind of real quick go over the announcements
Yeah,
we have?
absolutely. So we've got some good announcements specifically around some Kubernetes management, which is really cool. Some just kind of I think general awareness around Lighthouse
Yep.
tool that we have, which is
And if you
pretty
don't know, and if you don't know anything about Lighthouse, you're going to get to
You'll
know a
find
little bit
out.
about it.
That's right. Yep,
Yep.
yep. Streamlining a process to do some cool things with integrating some other aspects of your DevOps pipeline into the process, not DevOps related.
Yeah,
Uh,
I like that.
a collaborative effort that we are working on right now with another container company.
Yes.
Yeah, excuse me. And
To
last
to
but not
to be
least,
to be named very soon.
to be named. Yep. And last but not least, a really cool article about Mr. Rasinovich and some additional ARM capabilities that we have introduced or introducing, I should say.
Yes, that is exactly right, and we will be doing that. So, let's
Yeah.
kick it off with a little bit about Azure Arc.
Absolutely. So we in November actually of 2019, we announced the preview of Azure Arc. So Azure Arc is a set of capabilities, a mashup, if you will, right? A set of capabilities that enables the customer to manage hybrid scenarios.
Yeah.
So if you've
So
got
so
resources that are,
think of
yeah,
an arc,
yep,
A R
literally,
C, not
yep,
not A R
not
K,
Arch
not
or
two by
not
two.
Noah's Ark,
No,
yep,
no, not two by
not
two.
two by twos.
ARC. So this is the arc that helps you manage hybrid.
That's correct. Yep. So we've got a series of capabilities, and we've had the ability to do certain things hybrid for quite some time with the Microsoft Managed Agent and some of the capabilities that we had within that agent for reporting for Security Center. But Azure Arc really kind of I think completes that kind of management plane, right? So it gives you the ability at a high level to manage resources on premises in other clouds, and then of course obviously in Azure.
Yep,
Um,
absolutely.
so there's also a complementary technology that supports hybrid scenarios quite well, right?
Yeah, and that is Kubernetes.
Kubernetes.
Yeah.
Yes. So for those of it, for the viewers or listeners at home, Mark, can you just kind of give a brief overview of Kubernetes?
Yeah, Kubernetes is a technology that was incubated out of Google and now is just a part of the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And it allows you to manage, deploy, and operate containers at scale. And
Yes.
Kubernetes is the foundational platform that allows you to deploy on a whole bunch of servers. And from a developer point of view and from an app operations point of view, you can just keep piling on instances of your containers, and which we will talk about later, as a matter of fact.
Yep. Yes.
Uh, and you use the container format as kind of the delivery mechanism. We can deploy those onto Kubernetes at scale. And the nice thing about that is that Kubernetes really gives you kind of this consistent platform that you can run
Yes.
just about anywhere.
Yep. So the good news is now as there's a preview that has enabled Kubernetes as part of the Azure Arc management backplane. So if you have Kubernetes clusters that you've deployed on premises or in GCP or AWS, for example, or Azure, Azure Arc is going to enable the ability to provide the management backplane for those services regardless of where they are.
Yeah.
right? So, and let's be honest, I'm an advocate of high density, big clusters, right? Because to me, that's a smaller footprint, not smaller footprint, but it's a smaller management concern. But there are a lot of companies that would prefer to have many smaller clusters and not necessarily have them located just in one spot, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
what this does is it gives you the ability to manage all those clusters. You have monitoring, you have the ability to manage those clusters regardless of where they are and the
Yeah.
size and scope. So really cool capability.
Yeah, and I've actually scrolled down to the kind of the graphic here that shows Azure Arc and Azure Resource Manager. So you can kind of understand that you, as the customer, get to use the unified tools and experiences, which is
Yep.
kind of like the Azure portal, and use those same integrated DevOps management capabilities. But you can deploy them either to using Azure as kind of a overarching management plane to
Yep.
either deploy stuff in the Azure Resource Manager, that's the public cloud, or
Yep.
Azure Arc, which is in your data center, your edge. So think about it, one portal, and essentially, if you want to think about it, it's kind of like adding a new region to Azure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. It is.
and the region is your data center, but
Yep.
it's managed just the same way. You manage it from the Azure portal. Now, of course, obviously, there are a subset of services, and this is
Yep.
one of the services that we're adding.
Yep, exactly. And yeah, of course, as things mature and as things evolve, I would expect more and more services to be added to the backplane for management. But
Yeah,
today, this is a really cool capability. And like I said before, the reason I like this is because they're both very complementary in terms of being kind of location agnostic, which I
yeah.
think is really important.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the tenets of uh, uh, Kubernetes is it's really
Right.
all about being portable, and
Yep.
so we want to enable a new level of portability, which includes, managing it in your data center. So
Absolutely.
um,
Absolutely.
now, Azure Arc is in preview today, and you
Yep.
can check it out. You can get started and try out even the Kubernetes capability. Kubernetes is not the only capability that's available in Azure Arc, so
Mm,
go check it out and get to know Azure Arc because,
definitely.
Rick, I'm just going to reflect here for a second. Our journey with making hybrid easier has come so far. I mean, it started
Oh
with
my gosh.
Azure, what it was, Azure Pack,
Yep.
and that wasn't
Well, even
really, and then it was Azure Stack.
even before that, right? We had some rudimentary like SCOM integration, right?
Yeah.
So SCCM and some other stuff, and then we created this hybrid solution with Azure Pack that was a subset of Azure capabilities,
Hmm.
and then we came Azure Stack, which is trying to provide more fidelity, I think, between Azure as a public cloud and then Azure as your private resource.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it really has come a long way to now, of course, Azure Arc and being able to manage and monitor across hybrid scenarios. It's just, yeah, there's definitely been a
Yeah.
really cool evolution to watch.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. We want to talk a little bit about Lighthouse?
Yes, definitely. So Azure Lighthouse, this and this I think we kind of mentioned. This is more of a general awareness kind of concept, right, or topic. Azure Lighthouse gives you the ability to manage similar to Azure Arc, but instead Arc gives you the capability to manage your own environments,
Yeah.
right? So your own on-premises resources,
Yeah.
your Azure resources, your AWS resources. Azure Lighthouse is actually takes that a step further and allows you to act almost like a managed service provider. Right.
Yeah.
So Azure Lighthouse provides you the ability to do things like manage, let's say you can manage, like, say, 1,000 VMs across, say, 10 customers.
Yep. That's right.
Lighthouse, yeah. So Lighthouse is, in effect, gives you the ability to really kind of shine a light, no pun intended, right,
Yeah.
on all the
Yeah.
resources that you're managing, but not just in your own tenant.
Yep. Right. And so, for instance, think about this. I can think of a couple of scenarios. One is definitely the MSP managed service provider. So, in other words,
Yep.
if you're a company and you have some of your Azure that you don't want to manage, you want somebody else to manage it for you, you can
Yep.
actually project the management layer to them, to the
Right.
managed service provider, so that they can manage it on your behalf. So then that way they don't have some of the access, they don't have all access to your tenant. They actually don't have any access to your tenant, your Azure Active
Right.
Directory tenant, but the management of Azure is projected into their tenant. But we've got one more scenario. What about
Yeah.
M&A? What about
Yes.
M&A, right?
It's a great point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So in other words, if you purchase a company and on day one you come in and you want to start managing their Azure environment on day one, you could use
Yep.
Azure Lighthouse and act as your own MSP for
Hmm.
the company that just got bought. You could actually project their Azure environment into yours using Azure Lighthouse. So there's a lot of capabilities here, and I think the important thing to remember is just to know that this exists, to know
Yes.
that Azure Lighthouse exists, and that maybe you want to talk to your managed service provider about using it.
Yep. No, absolutely. And what I like about this solution too is the fact that I think you raised some really interesting scenarios, right? The mergers and acquisition piece, definitely the MSP piece, but again, it's also about just least privilege access, right?
Yeah,
So it's you only have access to the resources. They can basically say these are the resources that I want to project, that I want to provide access to outsiders to, right? It's not
yeah,
like you're lifting up the whole access to the subscription. You're not giving them carte blanche access to all your resources. And so, again, this falls in the spirit of least privilege access, potentially some just in time access, right? If you combine that with PIM, with JIT, with some of these other technologies, you really have a robust, at scale security model in terms of how you manage and monitor resources,
yeah.
which I love. I
Um,
mean,
I just wanted to highlight some of the latest innovations uh, in that this article highlights. It talks a little bit about service providers can now trigger notifications
yep.
in their own Azure control plane through activity logs. Customers can now upgrade their managed service offers inside their own portal experience and service provider views rather than visiting other portals or marketplaces. So there's actually quite a big list
Oh yeah.
there's another big one. Azure Backup Explorer and Backup Reports now offers cross-customer consolidated views. So in other words, if you're in a managed service provider and manage 10 or 15 or 20 or 50 or 500 customer tenants, you can actually see all of the backups across all of those tenants in Lighthouse
Hmm.
using the Backup Explorer. So these are the
Which is
kinds of
super
things that we're
cool.
doing. Yeah, it's also FedRAMP High
Yep.
certified service.
Yep.
It's a great service. Maybe something that's under talked about. Like just
Yeah.
like we don't talk about it
It's
too much. So
It's what do they call them? The best kept secrets.
yeah, it's definitely a well kept secret.
Well kept
So
secret. That's right. Absolutely.
yeah. So
Yep. No,
cool.
totally agree.
That's a
Yeah,
good one. Okay.
that's a great
Well,
one.
does anybody here on the call ever have to manage images?
Yes, I can imagine just about everybody at some point has to manage images.
Yep, that's right. So we have a service called Azure Image Builder, and this one was
Yep.
actually kind of new to me. I didn't know too much about this one, so this one was
Well,
it was exciting to read about.
it is cool, but it's funny because I want to say the announcement of its in and of itself was Ignite, right? So Azure Image Builder, Ignite Webcast, right? So this was actually kind of first, I think, announced at Ignite, but not a lot of people, I think, because a lot of people they think about image building separate from, for example, your CI/CD pipelines,
Yep,
which is some people think is separate from your infrastructure as code stuff, right? For
yep,
me personally, I like to think of them all as, I call it splat as code, right?
yep,
Everything is code.
yep.
And so the image
Images
building
as code.
process, yeah, and yeah, exactly. And you could do this absolutely today. There's great products out there. You've got some open source capabilities like Packer and some other tools that you can actually basically compose. We'll call it the gold standard image, right?
Mhm.
That's your company approved image, if you will, right? So with this capability, though, it basically makes it super easy to customize and manage images, or manage customized images, I should say, but actually treat it like it's a CI/CD pipeline process, right?
Yeah. And so what we end up with is an image that you can create in a CI/CD pipeline as a part of the build of your images, like as a part of the build of a VM maybe or whatever. But either
Sure.
way, we're talking about a first party service and
Yep.
capability that allows you to really keep your images up to date and get them built and get them deployed.
So the thing I like about this is, if I think about this from a CI perspective, just that continuous integration, as soon as a new image is signed off on, it goes into that CI process, right? So
Hmm.
you may build an image, you may enable I'm sorry, IIS, Internet Information Services, if it's a VM. You want to deploy your bits, you want to run some unit tests, you know what I mean? So it's like literally you can test it from the genesis of the image creation all the way through to what your app should look like as it's running on that platform. You don't necessarily have a line of demarcation between the traditional ops line where they build the images and deploy them, and then you got to wait for that to happen, and then you've got to get the permission and get the right privileges and access to deploy your app to that image. I mean, because technically you wouldn't even know if your code is fully functional, based on the policies and governance that they've applied. Maybe they have some NIST standards or CIS benchmarks that they've applied that have locked the machine down, and you won't necessarily know until it gets deployed and you can test it.
Yeah.
In this case, you could actually incorporate this into the CI pipeline. So if anything changes, you've got the ability to kind of see what's going to break real time as part of that process.
Yeah, and also just don't forget that we should mention that this goes hand in hand with the shared image gallery
Yes,
that you
that's a
can
good
use.
point.
So, in other words, you actually will take your images after you build it and put it in the Azure Shared Image Gallery. That can help you distribute it across the world, and then you can start using it from there.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
we're
That's a
really
great
building
point.
out that virtual machine process and making it really easy to manage, making it easy to run, and providing
Yep.
you with real first party Azure services to make it easy.
Yep, exactly. Making it
Yeah,
easy, right? Getting
yeah,
getting out of
making,
the business of
mm,
doing certain things, right? I
yeah.
won't say not low value because this is a very high value artifact that gets created,
But it's
but the
automated.
process, yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, it becomes highly
That's
automated. We're always trying to work toward a higher level of automation.
Yep,
Yeah.
definitely. Totally
Okay.
agree.
All
Yep, so
right.
it's pretty cool.
So there is a collaboration being announced. Although I don't know that
Yes.
it's really new because we actually have been collaborating with this
For
unnamed
quite
as
some
of
time.
yet company
Yeah.
for quite
Yeah,
some
yeah.
time. Why don't you talk about it a little bit, Rick?
Yeah, so for those of you that might remember some of the earlier Azure Flash News podcasts that we've done, I was doing some experimentation with Windows containers. And of course, as part of that process, I had to download and install Docker Desktop. And so in order to get things running, you go into maybe it's Visual Studio or you go into your Git repo and you put your Docker build or your build file in there and you run your Docker build command. You do a bunch of stuff, right? So the whole point, I guess the point I'm trying to drive home is I felt like I was constantly hopping between tools, the command line, Docker Desktop, Visual Studio. You know what I mean? It felt like it didn't feel like a seamless integration experience. Well, guess what?
Here we
It's
are.
about to feel like a seamless integration
That's right.
experience.
That's right.
So the cool thing is Microsoft and Docker are collaborating on new ways to not just deploy containers to Azure, but we're incorporating things like Docker Desktop and some of the other capable technologies, right, into it's being integrated more closely into Microsoft Azure
Hmm.
and the Visual Studio line of products.
Yeah, which I'm assuming includes both Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. We really
Yep.
want to make sure that both of those platforms are easy to use.
Yeah, exactly. So the integration actually really begins with the ability to create ACI, so Azure Container Instances, right? So any scenario where you can take an isolated container, you don't need orchestration, you don't need a bunch of advanced configuration with networking and some of the other policies. You just need to basically run a container, right? So think
Yeah.
you've got a website, you just want it to be up and running, and you don't care about the underpinnings. This is just it's a cattle, right? So
Yeah.
this is a
Right.
cattle type of asset that you have. So this whole set of tooling and capabilities is really enabled at the ACI level, which I think is pretty exciting. And with of course moving to more advanced scenarios, right? So there's a cool example that they use. It looks like it's a Python based game server app, right? That's being built and run locally using Docker Desktop, and then with the integration of desktop into Visual Studio and with Azure, you give the ability to deploy that right into like ACI.
Yeah, yeah. So there's going to be a continued. Well, there's one more thing I want to kind of just highlight
Yeah,
as a
please.
secondary thing. Don't forget that Windows includes the Windows subsystem for Linux version 2,
Yes.
and that is not really part of this announcement here, but it is part of the package.
Complementary.
Yeah, and
Yes.
so if you're developing on Windows, you can use the Windows subsystem for Linux, which runs a real Linux kernel on
Yep.
Windows, ready to go, and you can integrate that with your code pipeline so that you can use Visual Studio Code with the extensions to use the Windows subsystem for Linux too. So that you can do a Docker build and then run it right on the Windows subsystem for Linux right there on Windows.
Right there, literally. And the
Yeah.
cool thing about that is WSL2 has gotten a lot faster, right? It's
Yeah.
more streamlined, it's more optimized. So, if you, as you're going through the documentation here, you can see the experience is particularly fast using the new release. So if you haven't, gotten the new release with WSL2, make sure that you're up to date with all the versioning.
Yeah. Yeah. So keep checking out. We are investing and working with containers, working with Docker, working with Linux. Hey, what operating system can you run both Windows and Linux on? Windows.
Ours.
Yep, that's right. Okay, awesome. This is great. All right, well, I
Very
think
cool.
there's
There is,
one more
and this is
announcement here.
something we were excited about, right? I mean,
Yeah, I
we couldn't, especially since it was literally just yesterday, at least that it was officially kind of this blog was published. It was
yeah
probably, you know, people probably knew about it for maybe a week or so, but we finally officially did the official blog post. So,
yeah.
Mark, tell me, anytime Mark Rusinovich says something, people listen, right?
E E F E F
Yeah,
E F
Hutton.
Hutton. What?
When
Yeah,
EF Hutton talks, people
listen.
listen,
Yeah,
right?
and there's a whole bunch of people out there, Rick, that are listening. They'll have no idea
We
what we're talking.
totally just dated ourselves.
Yeah, it's a little kid saying A B C D
Yeah.
E F E F
Uh-huh.
E F
Oh my
Hutton.
gosh, I totally
Oh,
forgot about that
how
commercial,
about
dude.
that?
Nice
Okay.
work. Wow.
Okay.
Way to pull it from the archives.
Nice. That is way back.
Yeah, I
Okay.
love it.
Anyway, yeah. So there's a couple of things in here that are just reminders about the way we do ARM templates. So like
Yeah.
one thing is the quick start gallery that's available on GitHub, and then there's kind of a searchable website front end that allows you to see what's in the quick start gallery. But that's a whole huge set of ARM templates that are
Oh,
ready to
it's a
go.
ton. A
But
ton.
but one of the main things we're announcing is the Azure Resource Manager tools in Visual Studio Code. And
Yes.
this is really, really cool. So what you need to know is that uh, there's some support for snippets. There's support for
Mhm.
IntelliSense and
Yes.
ARM templates,
Yep.
colorization, ARM template outlines,
Yep.
comments, all kinds of
Dude,
things you can do.
okay. Comments. Okay, can we just say comments in a
Can we comment
JSON?
on comments?
Can we just, right?
Yeah.
So can I just, I mean, finally, we can put comments in our JSON files.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I know, right? And then, but what if you have what if pre-deployment impact analysis as part of this
Yeah. Wait,
process,
wait, wait.
which
Hold on, hold on.
is
We have to explain what that is. Rick, you got to go back.
yes,
Okay. So I'm going to
okay,
scroll up just a little bit farther. You can't see this, but I'm going to scroll up a little bit farther
yep,
so people can kind of see this little picture here on the what if pre-deployment impact analysis. So one of the big things people got excited about was Terraform. You could see what it was going to do beforehand.
totally. That was huge. I love that about Terraform.
But now you can actually run a deployment in a what if scenario. Like, okay, so if I
Yep,
run this ARM template deployment, what is it going to do? I think people are really
exactly.
nervous about using complete mode
Oh,
deployments.
totally,
They're a little nervous.
totally.
I
Yep,
keep telling people, but if you go to dev to stage to test to pre-prod to prod, by the time you get to prod, if you have an ARM template that's going rogue and deleting stuff, you'll know before you get to production. But people want to know what's going to
yep,
change, so
yep,
you can start using GitHub. The repo is on GitHub.
yep.
The what if analysis is available today.
Exactly, which is really kind of cool. So the pre-deployment impact analysis basically saying, here's what you're about to change, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's that confirmation that yep, it's doing exactly what I thought it's going to do. Let's go ahead and yep, we crossed our T's, we dotted our I's. Let's go ahead and deploy this, which I think is really slick. I also like the idea of the deployment scripts, right? So
Yeah.
we recently announced, I shouldn't say recent, it's contextual, right? We're in COVID time and cloud time, so it's almost like we're traveling in a fifth dimension at this
That's
point.
right. It's crazy.
um, but deployment scripts. So there's a lot of times where you've got an ARM template, but then you still that last mile have to run a custom script, right? Because ARM templates will deploy resources and I'll say configure them. But for example, if you're deploying, say, certain resources, there's follow-up things you have to do, right? So I may deploy an Azure SQL database, but then I have to go out and create tables,
Yeah, you
right? I
actually
may
have
have
to
to go out,
like
right?
start a process or run a SQL
Yes,
script or
yes.
whatever.
Yep, exactly. So the new deployment script resource will execute any PowerShell or Bash script as part of your template deployment.
So
Okay.
so like I just want to pause here because I've tried to
Yep.
do Like, okay, so
I know.
let's go back to the old days. There
Yeah.
was a thing called a, what was it called? It's actually mentioned. Sorry, it was called a script resource or deployment script
Yes.
resource. So
Deployment script resource.
yeah,
Yep.
it was a block in your ARM template that said, I have a
Yep.
script. It's over there on
Yep.
blob storage, and that was kind of the only option. And it had to be a public blob storage account. It was kind of, I don't know, not ideal. Let's just say it wasn't ideal.
Right.
But this means you can actually put that PowerShell or Bash or whatever right in
Yep.
your template, like right there,
Exactly.
in
Right
line.
there. Yep. Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, as we continue to evolve and we continue to focus, as part of this, they specifically call it out in this post, the continued focus on quality and reliability. The ARM template toolkit it's also open sourced, right? So we open sourced our ARM template toolkit, which we use internally at Microsoft, right? So
Yes.
when we're
Let me
so
scroll
we use
down.
it to follow best practices,
See
which is
where
really
it's at.
exciting. But you can see it says we've made significant improvements to reduce our deployment time for large-scale deployments by roughly
Yes.
75%.
Yes, and I found this in the
Okay.
screen that on my screen share. You'll notice down here, does this highlight? Does it highlight in this? Yeah, it actually does. So if you'll notice here, right here, this paragraph right down here, it talks about the ARM template toolkit. And I actually took a look at this the other day. It actually runs pester tests that we
Oh,
use.
cool.
Yeah, that's actually what it's doing. And
Yep.
there's like a new PowerShell commandlet that they deploy that
Yep.
it's like called run dash ARM template toolkit or something like that. And what it does is you pass it the ARM template that you want to test, and it does a lot of just sort of rudimentary tests like, does it conform to the right, does it have the right number of like required, the 4 required paragraphs,
Oh,
variables,
yeah. Yep.
parameters, resources, and
Resources and
outputs.
output.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
then there's lots of other things that it checks for, and you can go look at what that does on GitHub.
Hmm.
Feel free to do that, and we use it on our stuff, and you guys can
Oh,
use
yeah.
it too.
Yeah, and pester tests are cool. I mean, the original concept of the pester test started really with PowerShell, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah, I mean,
the PowerShell concept.
yeah, Pester. I've actually been doing a lot of work with Pester lately, Rick.
That's why I'm bringing this up. I
Well,
know you've been doing it.
yeah, and Pester is a unit test framework for PowerShell, and basically what it is it's just a set of commandlets that allow you to do these tests, and the commandlets are shaped in such a way that it's very readable. It doesn't there
Mhm.
are shortcuts that are defined so that it looks very readable rather than create dash test or whatever it is.
Uh,
There's actually a little short shortcuts, and
yep.
it allows you to assert. And basically, in the end, what we're talking about here is asserting that it looks in the ARM template in PowerShell,
Yep.
Power versus Bash. PowerShell is an
Okay.
object-based language. So in other words, you can take a JSON object, which is just a serialization of an object, and
Yep.
import it into a PowerShell object, right? It's not a string, it's an object now, and you can use dot
Yep.
notation and actually use dot
Exactly.
notation in your PowerShell to dot notate from the top into the resources, into the look through all of the resources and make sure
Yep.
that there is a paragraph called parameters, variables, resources, and outputs. You actually can do that in Pester. It's really easy. And then you assert that they're all
Cool.
there. And if they're not there, then the assertion fails. And here's the connection. Here's the kicker. In your CI/CD pipeline in Azure DevOps, you can actually pull those test results into Azure DevOps, and in Azure DevOps, you'll see the test results of your ARM templates. So think
That's
about
awesome.
that. It is awesome. Think about security tests that you want to run for your security department, like storage accounts must have
Yeah.
private containers. You can
Yep.
actually use a pester test as a part of your build, as your CI build with
Hmm.
unit tests, to go in and make sure that all of the containers that are defined in your ARM templates don't have public endpoints.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is
and
very
it's just
cool.
so critical again, you raise a great anytime we talk about security, anything you can do to validate and verify your security controls are in place is huge.
Yeah, it is. It is. It is awesome. Okay, uh, I guess that's kind of it. I mean, is that
Yeah,
it?
it kind of brings us
Yeah,
to the end of the show. That is it. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, we went through pretty quick. There's lots of more announcements to come. We obviously, I think we mentioned last time we had to go on a brief hiatus when we kind of got shut down here from a facilities perspective,
yeah,
but we are back online now. We found a good way, I think, to actually, and a really good way, Mark. Thank you for that.
yeah. You're
To
welcome.
interact with YouTube and do some cool stuff there. So
Yeah,
hopefully
this
we will
is.
be talking about announcements on a more fast and furious pace here in the
I
near future.
I think we are ready, Rick. And just to let everybody know, just to kind of sum this up, I think we're going to continue to broadcast live on YouTube. So
Yep.
check it out on YouTube if you like, and you can catch us there even live.
Yeah.
I see we still only have one person, which is me viewing.
Yeah.
So nobody, but I wouldn't expect anybody to know about it.
No.
So
No.
if you're interested in catching the show live video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You
And
can
it will
search for
tell you when we're live. Yeah.
that's right, Azure Flash News out on YouTube. But you can also, I'll actually download this and continue to get it out on iTunes, Google Play. I'll get it onto Google Play,
Yep.
and I guess it also goes to Stitcher. Yeah,
Stitcher.
yeah.
Yeah. Don't forget Stitchers.
Rick, where can people find you if they want to catch you after the show?
Yep, no, it's a great question. If people need to get a hold of me, I am available. My email address is rick, W-E-Y, at Microsoft.com. And of course, I'm monitoring the DMs and Twitter account at Azure Flash News. So either one of those, you'll likely get a response back from me. Well, for sure from me from my email address,
Yeah, the
but
Twitterverse.
also from Azure Flash News as
Oh,
well. And
Rick, as a matter of
and
fact,
what,
when we start this, you should go ahead and send out a tweet saying that we're live.
good
Live
point.
on
Yes,
YouTube.
live on YouTube with a
Live on
link.
YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
if you want to catch me, you can catch me on Twitter at mgarner. That's fine. Or you can just email me mgarner at microsoft.com. I'll be happy to take your emails there. And you know, what do you think, Rick? I mean, did we do it? We streamed
I think
live to
so.
YouTube.
I think so. I think we did. I'm really, really impressed. Really cool how all this stuff kind of came together, especially given that you and I were not able to sit down side by side and collaborate on this, right? It was all
Nope.
done, independent research on your part, which I greatly appreciate. But then kind of bringing it together, testing it, kind of making sure everything kind of works, and it was very cool. I think this is awesome, man.
Yeah. Well, thanks. All right. Well, then I guess we will catch people hopefully maybe next week. Maybe,
Yeah,
maybe we
that's
can
the
just do
hope, right?
one right away. I
Yep.
am taking the week of July 4th off. So I don't know
Ditto.
about you. It's okay. So we
Yep.
won't do a show then, but we're going to try and get back into the weekly habit here because we've got
Yeah,
it down.
definitely.
So,
Yep. Yep. So no matter
okay.
what, though, thank you very much for tuning in. We always appreciate that. I mean, we're here for you, but we wouldn't be here without you. So for that, we're grateful. We're always grateful. And of course, per usual, I will say keep your fingers on your sanitized keyboard and your head in the socially distant cloud. And we'll look forward to chatting with you next time.
Thanks, everybody.